Hey everyone, Rob Van Dyson again. I'm out here at Hobble Creek. I'm actually not in my truck. I actually walk down towards the river, or the creek, or crick, or however you want to say it. So, this week has been kind of an interesting week. For me, it's actually pretty good. I got a call around Wednesday from my boss asking me to come back in. They have some new safety regulations in, but other than that, it looks like I'll probably be back to not exactly normal, but pretty close. So, for me personally, things have been going pretty good. I've been keeping up on my watching. I've barely avoided going insane with the shelter-in-place stuff. But overall, pretty good. Unfortunately, some things have gone kind of bad for some people that I know. Not directly one of them directly for them. Basically, a friend of mine had to put his father into a mental health facility or a care home. Don't know all the details. Not really much of my business, but obviously that's got to be hard. I couldn't imagine putting my mom in a place like that. And it was one of those situations where it was the only I'm not going to say the only option, but, this isn't, we're going to stick mom in a care home facility just so we don't have to take care of her. It was, he actually needed some help that can be best provided by that facility. And then a friend of my wife's died of cancer, and apparently it was one of the best friends of one of my sisters-in-law, which, I do kind of consider a sister. I don't throw around the term in-law very much. I'm really lucky in my in-laws, in that when I look at them, I actually do see family, not just people that got married into. So obviously that's been hard on them. My heart does go out to them. I didn't really get a chance to know this person who died of cancer. I didn't really get to know this person's father. But I can kind of put myself in their shoes. I have lost people who are close to me. There was a guy who was a friend of mine in the Marines. We weren't like super close friends, but we were friends, and was really good friends with a guy who I actually was a close friend with, and still kind of am. We keep in touch on Facebook and stuff like that. And then a couple of years ago, he died. I don't have all of the specifics on what happened to him, but the impression I got was, that it could have been prevented. Like I said, I don't actually know what the cause of death was. When I found out about it, the call kind of went, don't ask a bunch of questions. The family isn't ready to deal with these, and so I just pretty much left it alone. I have my theories, but that kind of did hit me hard. So, I can relate to losing someone who you're close to. And even if it's not someone like they weren't my wife's best friend, but she knew them. She knew them well. And, I could tell it was hard on her. Anyways, on that happy note, I go back to work on Monday, and I can actually kind of get out of the house and start doing things the way I feel I should be doing things. One of the podcasts I listen to is called The Order of Man by Ryan Mickler. I think I'm saying his name right. Um, and I just listened to one of his podcasts. I'll see if I can't look up the exact podcast it was and put it in. But it was talking about in these troubled times, how a man can step up. And the term that he often uses, and I actually know where he got that term from, but it is a man's duty to protect, provide, and preside. And I don't think a lot of people realize how much those terms overlap. There's an old joke out there. Not entirely true, but you kind of get the feel of it. And it goes, a woman worries about her future until she gets married. A man never worries about his future until he gets married. And obviously that's very dated, but it does kind of speak into the mindset or the innate psychological mindset of a lot of different people. And I can tell you, I honestly do consider my future a lot more now that I actually have a family than when I didn't. When I was a single man, I knew I could get through. I could live off of ramen and mac and cheese, and while it wouldn't necessarily be healthy for me, I could do it. On the other hand, I don't want my wife and daughter just to have to live on, ramen and mac and cheese. So I think a lot more about things like that. And so the things that he was talking about in this podcast, I'm going to kind of switch gears just a little bit here, was 4 things. I'm going to see if I can remember them. I didn't write them down. I don't have my notepad with me right now anyway. But he was talking about a man's ability to anticipate problems. And everything from, sit down, okay, what can go wrong? At the beginning of this year, I don't think anyone really saw that we'd be in the middle of a pandemic. But we all kind of knew that something could go wrong. We all know things could go wrong. There are things like layoffs or other issues that, happen quite frequently. It's like, okay, so I can see, intellectually I can sit down and I can look at, okay, what are all the things that can go wrong? All right, well, what can I do to mitigate those things? And there are things that I could definitely do better, and I'm looking at. But certain things are out of your control, but a lot of things actually aren't. Some of the preparations and stuff that we've made are allowing us to handle this a lot better, including my wife going out and finding work. And my wife is actually really lucky in that she works for a company that she actually has a deep passion for. Or the industry she has a deep passion for. She likes the company she works for, and she's really happy, and she gets a decent paycheck from it. And she's also learned a lot of skills that are highly transferable. And I have been looking at every job I've had recently, not so much for the paycheck it can give me. Obviously, that's important. I need to eat. I need to provide for my family. But every job I've been looking at, I've been taking the attitude of, what can I learn from this company? What can I learn from this job? What can I learn from this as a whole? And that, I think, has really stood me in good stead. Then you just kind of have the situational preparedness, and The book he references, I haven't read it, is called Left of Bang. And it's talking about how in the majority of times where things have really gone south, there have been small indications that things weren't right, things were going to happen. And to have your situational awareness up enough that you can catch those clues. And so another good book out there is Who Moved My Cheese? And it went through popularity. It was one of those must-read business books maybe a decade ago, at least several years. And it was really big in the business community of you need to be paying attention. And for those of you who haven't read it, it's an allegory, I think I'm using that word right, of these two tiny people and these two mice that lived in a maze. And every day they go scampering out looking for cheese. And then one day, all four of them find this huge stash. I mean, just this mountain of cheese, and they looked at it and they're like, I'm never going to be able to eat all this cheese. We're going to be in cheese for the rest of the life. We're living good. And in the story, the two humans, or the two tiny people, get very complacent. And in fact, they move closer to the cheese so they don't have to go for a nice long run. And, they just show up, they eat their fill of cheese, they lay around, etc., etc., etc. The two mice never get complacent. And, first day, they kind of take an inventory of what's there. They know exactly how much cheese is there. They know what condition the cheese is. All right, today everything is nice and fresh. Everything, there's no mold, no anything like that. And unless it's blue cheese, and obviously there's going to be mold, but I don't particularly like blue cheese anyway. And every day they come in and they take a look around. It's like, okay, what is the state of the cheese? How much cheese is left? Has there been new cheese added? Is there more cheese gone than there should be? What's the condition of the cheese? Is it still fresh cheese? Is it starting to go a little stale? Etc., etc., etc. And then they start to notice that this pile of cheese, isn't as fresh as it used to be, and the pile isn't nearly as big as it was. And so they go, they come to this cheese pile every day. They take an inventory, they're paying attention. And then one day they get there and the cheese is gone. They're not really surprised. They knew that their supply was dwindling. And they get there, the cheese is gone, and they immediately go scampering off throughout the maze looking for more cheese. Hem and Haw, the two little people, show up, see there's no cheese, and they're completely taken by surprise. And at first they just lay around, moaning and complaining and, getting mad at the universe. Where's my cheese? My cheese should be here. The cheese has always been here. Why isn't the cheese here? And they lay about, and they get hungrier and hungrier and hungrier. And each day, they show up expecting the cheese to somehow magically reappear, and it never does. Eventually, one of them, straps on his running shoes and takes off into the maze, coming to the realization the cheese isn't coming back. He's got to go do. The other person just lays around and just keeps on whining and complaining. And, with the exception of calling out the lessons to be learned from this a little bit more, that's where the story ends. We don't know what happened to Sniff and Scratch, the two mice. and we don't know fully what happened to him and how. Um, but I think it's fairly reasonable to consider that whichever one of the little people, I don't remember which one it was, stayed, that if he didn't move around, or if cheese didn't magically appear, which in this allegory I don't think it did, that he would have starved to death. Or actually have gone so hungry that he did have to follow in a much weaker state his companion, as his companion had left to go look for more cheese. And that kind of goes around with the situational awareness. Are we aware of what's going on? In our own lives, both on the macro and the micro. And I've been blindsided by stuff before. And I believe that most adults have as well. And if you haven't, let me tell you, it is not pleasant. But if you can keep your wits about you, and if you can just kind of constantly be smelling your cheese, constantly be looking at what's going on, what is the feel of the place you're in? Whether it's like you're in a restaurant and the feel of the place changes, okay, something's going on. Or if, you're at your work and, the boss might say one thing, but you're noticing signs of something else. Or if the boss isn't saying anything and you're starting to notice signs, That situational awareness can give you the extra time you need to position yourself better. So, situational awareness, your perception was the first point. Second point was your preparedness. I think a lot of people are realizing right now that, being able to go to the store once a week might not always be an option. Or that, the fact that I work for a good company, which I think I do, and the company's making money, which I think mine was, up until the point where the pandemic closed down a couple of our key markets, where the states mandated very strong shelter-in-place orders, and so people couldn't go out and buy our product. Well, like I said, at the beginning of this year, we couldn't have seen that coming. And it was a possibility, and I knew it was a possibility as soon as these shelter-in-place orders started going out. And I knew that my state could be one of the ones. Fortunately, Utah has done a pretty reasonable level. But let me put it to you in this way, with a poignant, maybe not poignant, but with a story that's a little bit more pragmatic. So I was furloughed, as you know, and therefore under the new COVID guidelines and regulations, I'm eligible for unemployment. I don't even have to look for another work because I'm expected to be able to return to my former work, which I will be on Monday, thank goodness. That day after I was furloughed, I applied for unemployment. I still haven't gotten a check or any of the money. They're saying that there are some, how do they say it? Issues which they are looking into further to determine my eligibility. So, and then they gave me a deadline and they'll make a decision. And for me, it's going to be 1 to 2 weeks after I go back to work. So if I had just relied on that, I would be truly hosed. And for me, not getting that unemployment check is an inconvenience. We could use the money. There's no doubt about that. But the way we set things up and the way good grace has fallen, you know, we're not in desperate straits. Tight, but not desperate. And I just think, because I have been in that position where I would have needed that money to support my family, and I think back on other people who are probably in similar situations to mine who do need that money, and I get a little ticked off just because, I've been there, and I know what that feels like. But because we made preparations, and we had put things into place to help give us more resiliency, we were actually able to get through this. I may or may not ever receive that money. I don't know. We'll see. But, it's like, okay, as a man, what am I doing to prepare my family? And, a lot of the preparations, are in part due to my wife. And because she's got a good head on her shoulders and she's done really well by our family. I'm very lucky. But it is my job, I feel, as a man, to be the head of that. And it's kind of given me some pause to look back and say, okay, I need to take a little bit more active a role in this. And to shore up our preparations even more. Okay. So that was the second point. That was his third point. His second point was training. And it's like, what skills do you have that are going to allow you to get through things? And obviously things is a large catch-all term. It could mean a fire, it could mean financial difficulty, it could mean an active shooter, it could mean whatever. What skills do you have in place to help you get through so that no matter what, your family can survive? And I've been thinking about that, and I have been doing training. I do actually have some backup issues. Is there stuff I could pick up? Yes, definitely. Is there stuff I need to pick up? Yes. But I've been improving my skills with blacksmithing. I'm getting to the point where I actually think I can start selling some of my stuff. I've learned a little bit of welding, and that is a skill that I can employ to earn money and to help provide for my family and to make stuff my family needs. During this lockdown, I'm just trying to find a good place that's comfortable and not glaring out the sun. I have learned a little bit about gardening. Mostly I've learned how much I don't know. I've done a little bit more woodworking of building things with wood. And the stuff I build has been functional. By no means am I a woodworker. I've even learned a little bit of masonry. You don't want me building your house, but I've learned some of the basics on that during this. So I've actually come away with some skills from this situation that are going to help me and my family, either directly, financially, or indirectly through the fact that I can now do things and we don't have to go out and buy them. And so things like that, your training. What are you doing for your training? What are you doing to improve your skills in all different things? Both things that will help you financially, things that will help you run the house, things that will help shore up your family. So we've had your awareness of the situation, both long-term mental and just everyday physical. What's going on, around you. What's the feel of the place, etc. If there's smoke coming from the kitchen of that restaurant we were talking about. And for the life of me, I can't remember the fourth thing right now. But they all kind of play together, But basically it's, what are you doing to improve the resiliency of yourself and your family. We don't know what's going to happen. We obviously, like I've said this several times at the beginning of this year, we didn't know there was going to be a pandemic. But here we are. We don't know what's going to happen in the fall. Heck, we don't even know what's going to happen next month. When 9/11 happened, no matter what your conspiracy theories are or not, everyone in that building in those buildings didn't know what was going to happen that day. They went to work thinking it was just going to be another day. And it wasn't. And it changed all of America. And in a lot of ways it changed the world. This pandemic is going to change the world. I don't think it'll all be in good ways, but the change is going to happen. And some of it can be good ones. And I guess my question to you is, knowing that we don't know what's going to happen exactly. Could it be another terrorist attack? Could it be a mass shooting? Could it be a fire? Could it be a loss of a job? Could it be whatever? What are we doing to prepare? And as Jack Spirko from the Survival Podcast often says, you don't prepare for one particular event. What you do is you look at the commonality of disasters. When something happens, what do people need? What do people have to do to survive? And you shore up to survive without systems of support. The vast majority of disasters tend to be localized, sometimes even just down to the family itself. When I've gotten laid off, the disaster doesn't necessarily affect my neighbors, it just affects my family. So I am without the system of support of an income. What can I do to shore that up? If it's an earthquake, if it's a fire, if it's, fill in the blank, short of, a meteor coming in and destroying the entire earth, what can you do? What can you do to shore up and to survive without those systems of support? Alright, so that's my general thoughts. I have a few other things on my mind, but I'm already at 28 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and end it here before this gets too long. And I'm wishing you all the best. Fin Dyson out.